Evelyn Carter testifies against her brother Nathan for murder, sending him to prison for 25 years. After his release, Nathan seeks revenge, tormenting Evelyn and her family until he kidnaps Evelyn's daughter Grace. In a final confrontation, Evelyn kills Nathan to save her child. Though traumatized and guilt-ridden, she helps Grace heal and gradually accepts that protecting her family was the only choice, even as Nathan's memory continues to haunt her. Before starting the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and don't forget to like and share the video. So let's move on to our story. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished oak and stale sweat. The crowd inside hummed with nervous energy, a blend of regular citizens hungry for drama, law students scribbling notes, and family members clutching at shards of composure. In the witness stand, Evelyn Carter's hands trembled despite her knuckles clenching the wooden rail with all the force her body could muster. Across the room, her younger brother, Nathan Carter, stared at her, not with the wide-eyed innocence she remembered from their childhood in Georgia, when he used to chase fireflies with a mason jar, calling out her name with unguarded joy. No, this Nathan, the 26-year-old man with bloodshot eyes and a jaw hardened by fight or flight survival, glared at her as though she had pulled the ground from under his feet. His stare was betrayal and hatred compressed into a single look. The prosecutor's voice anchored Evelyn back into reality. "Miss Carter," he asked, brushing imaginary dust off his suit, "can you please tell the court what you saw on the night of March 14th? Her throat locked. She wished desperately that her voice would vanish, that she'd become invisible. But silence here meant complicity, and complicity meant enabling Nathan to bury himself deeper into the cycle of crime he had fallen into. I saw him," she whispered, her words carrying farther than she intended, amplified by a courtroom desperate to consume every syllable. "I saw Nathan pull the trigger." A gasp rippled through the gallery. Even the judge, whose stony face had been neutral all morning, shifted slightly forward. Nathan's lawyer scribbled something furiously. And Evelyn? Evelyn felt her chest tighten so sharply she thought her ribs might crack. Nathan slammed his fists on the defense table, causing two bailiffs to step closer. His voice boomed, raw and furious. "You're lying, Evie. You're a goddamn liar." The judge banged his gavel, demanding order. But inside Evelyn's heart, there was no order left. There was only the echo of that night, the muzzle flash she could never stop replaying, and her own scream as she called out his name too late. Long before that night, long before the testimony, the Carter siblings had been each other's backbone. Their father, Earl Carter, had been crushed in a factory accident when Evelyn was 13 and Nathan only 10. Their mother fell apart after that, drowning herself in whiskey and disappearing into bars, leaving them to fend for themselves in a decaying house on the edge of Macon, Georgia. Evelyn had sacrificed her teenage dreams of escaping to New York. Instead, she worked 2 jobs, flipping burgers by day and cleaning motels by night, to keep food on the table and Nathan in school. To her, Nathan wasn't just a brother, he was almost her child. She memorized the cadence of his laugh, the pride when he won his first basketball game in high school, the trembling fear when he got suspended for punching a bully. But Nathan was constellations she couldn't keep aligned. After graduation, college wasn't an option for them financially, and Nathan drifted into a crowd Evelyn never trusted. A few small-time hustles here and there, some marijuana dealing, stolen speakers smuggled out of cars. It seemed harmless at first, the kind of rebellion she once scolded him for but ultimately forgave. Until the circle hardened into real crime, armed robberies, gang affiliations, and debts he couldn't repay. The night of March 14th had begun like any other for Evelyn. She closed up her shift at the diner, tucked a cheap novel into her purse, and walked home past cracked sidewalks. But when she saw a familiar, battered sedan parked across the street from her apartment building, her stomach clenched. Nathan sat inside, tapping at the steering wheel with nervous energy. "Get in," he said when she approached. She could smell sweat and adrenaline laced with the metallic scent of gun oil as soon as she slid into the passenger seat. "Nate, what are you doing with that?" pointing at the gun on his lap. "Relax," he hissed. "I just need to scare someone. Collections business. Donovan's got guys everywhere tonight, and I can't flake. Donovan. The name was enough to freeze Evelyn's veins. He was the mid-level crime boss who controlled most of the narcotics trade in South Atlanta. If Nathan was working collections for him, things were far worse than she had imagined. "No," she said sharply. "This isn't you. We can go home. Screw Donovan. We'll figure out the debt." "It's too late," Nathan snapped, eyes wild. Minutes later, she found herself outside a warehouse on the industrial edge of town, pleading with Nathan not to get out of the car. Her world shattered when the argument escalated inside, shouts, crashes, and then the gunshot. When she stormed through the doors, her brother stood over a man clutching his stomach, blood blooming across his shirt. Nathan's hands trembled on the gun while his eyes searched Evelyn's face, begging silently for her to rewrite the moment. But the truth was carved in gunpowder smoke. She called 911, she screamed his name, and when the cops swarmed in, she was the one who told them what she saw. Now, in the courtroom, the man who had once been her world glared at her like she'd gutted him from the inside out. His betrayal clung to her chest heavier than any sentence he could face. Nathan was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in a Georgia state penitentiary. Evelyn felt her insides collapse the day they led him away in chains. But prison changes people, and for Nathan Carter, betrayal bred something worse than regret. It bred revenge. Inside those walls, Nathan's rage fermented, hardened into purpose. He replayed Evelyn's testimony every sleepless night, each word cutting like knives. In his eyes, she hadn't saved him, she had destroyed him. She had abandoned the blood oath of family, choosing law over loyalty. And Nathan Carter swore that when he got out, whenever that day was, he would burn down the world Evelyn had built for herself. The clanging of steel doors was the only music Nathan Carter knew now. The sound followed him through the endless days and nights in Georgia State Penitentiary. At first, he counted his sentence by weeks, then by months, until years stretched like an endless desert with no horizon. Inside, the air was thick with sweat, disinfectant, and the unspoken law of survival. You were either predator or prey. Nathan refused to kneel. 3 weeks into his sentence, Nathan learned the rules the hard way. A group of inmates cornered him in the communal showers, testing the newcomer's resolve. His ribs cracked under fists and boots, blood spraying into tile grout. Curled on the ground, the taste of iron coating his lips, Nathan burned his sister's face into his memory. Not the childhood Evelyn, the adult Evelyn. Standing in court, her voice trembling, but steady, condemning him with those words, "I saw Nathan pull the trigger." Every blow became her fault. Every rib fractured was her betrayal. They weren't hurting Nathan Carter, the criminal. They were punishing Nathan Carter, the betrayed brother. When he finally managed to crawl back to his bunk, he whispered a promise to the ghost of his sister's testimony. "I'll get out, Evelyn. And when I do, you'll see what it means to lose everything." Life inside could eat a man alive unless he learned structure. For Nathan, structure came in the form of Marino Delgado, an ex-gang captain serving life without parole. Delgado had command inside the prison, not through brute force, but through intellect. He knew how to read people, how to trade favors, how to control others with strings they couldn't see. Delgado spotted Nathan's fury the way hunters spot wounded prey, but he didn't take advantage. He molded him. "You're burning hot, kid. A fire that doesn't learn to control itself burns out fast. You want revenge? Patience, strategy, timing. Let them think you're broken while you sharpen the blade." Nathan devoured the book, then another, then another. By the time 5 years passed, his body had grown stronger, his fists harder, but most importantly, his mind colder. While Nathan hardened behind walls, Evelyn tried to start fresh. After the trial, Macon had become a cage of whispers and judgment. At the diner, customers eyed her like she was Judas. At church, People muttered about how she had chosen justice over blood. One night, she packed her belongings into 2 duffel bags, took a bus ticket north, and never looked back. Chicago welcomed her with its icy winds and endless skyline. She studied nursing at night, scrubbing hospital floors in the day just to cover tuition. Slowly, she built a life rooted in care, in trying to heal others, because she couldn't heal herself. Despite her best efforts, Nathan haunted her, in the hum of ventilators, in the hollow look of overdosed patients, in the sound of doors locking behind psych ward rooms, everywhere. Guilt clung like a shadow she couldn't wash away. By the 8th year, Evelyn had earned her nursing license and even found companionship with Michael, a quiet electrician who loved her scars instead of running from them. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to envision a future: marriage, children, a modest home in Oak Park. But fate doesn't allow Carter siblings peace for long. Prison mail was screened, but Nathan's words still managed to drip venom onto the page. The first letter came on Evelyn's 30th birthday. "They call this place hell, but I call it a classroom. Every day I learn how to make you regret what you did. You chose them over me. One day, you'll pay for that." Michael urged her not to read any more, to burn the letters, but Evelyn tucked them away in a shoebox under her bed. She couldn't explain why. Maybe because some warped part of her believed reading his rage was a way of keeping him alive, acknowledging that, despite the bars separating them, they were still bound by blood. But as the years rolled by, one thing grew certain: Nathan would not forgive. 15 years into his sentence, Nathan filed for appeal. Delgado, old and frail by then, had taught him how to exploit loopholes in the justice system. Arguments about mishandled evidence, about unlawful procedures during arrest. At first, this seemed impossible, but cracks formed in the system. Witnesses who died, cops who retired, exculpatory evidence mishandled. By year 17, the impossible happened. Nathan's conviction was overturned for retrial. Time served, good behavior records, carefully constructed thanks to Delgado's mentoring, and overcrowded prisons worked in his favor. Against Evelyn's worst nightmares, Nathan Carter walked free in his early 40s. Gone was the reckless, impulsive Nathan who once brandished a gun for quick money. The man who walked out was disciplined, hardened, and patient. His years in confinement were not wasted, they were a forge. When he saw daylight for the first time in nearly 2 decades, he swore quietly to Delgado's memory, "The fire waited. Now it burns." He didn't go to old haunts. Donovan was long dead, most of his gang replaced by new players. Nathan wasn't interested in slipping back into the underworld. His target was singular: Evelyn. Evelyn had a 9-year-old daughter now, Grace, with Michael. They lived in a modest 2-story house outside Chicago, the kind of place where bikes cluttered the porch and laughter spilled into the yard during summer evenings. Evelyn believed, perhaps foolishly, that the past was locked away forever, until one afternoon she received an official-looking envelope in her mailbox. Inside, it was one sentence written in her brother's old handwriting: "I'm out." Her hands shook. She dropped the letter as though it were radioactive. She hadn't told Grace much about Nathan, only that Uncle Nate made mistakes. Now every hallway shadow, every unfamiliar car parked on her street filled her with dread. Because blood doesn't forget, and Nathan had been waiting for this reunion for nearly 2 decades. Nathan Carter stepped onto the streets of Chicago with the same precision he had learned in prison, never rushing, never announcing his intentions. He owned nothing but a duffel bag, a few changes of clothes, and a mind sharpened into a weapon. For 18 years, he had fantasized about this moment, rehearsed it as though revenge was a ritual script. His sister had built a life out of his ashes, and now he would scatter her peace the way she scattered his freedom. The first step wasn't confrontation, it was study. For weeks, Nathan lingered on the fringes of Evelyn's world like a ghost only he controlled. He staked out the hospital where she worked night shifts as a nurse. He memorized her schedule, her routes home, the way she stopped for coffee at the same cafe 3 blocks from the hospital. He observed her laughter when she spoke with coworkers, that carefully built mask of normalcy hiding the guilt he knew still chewed at her core. Then there was Michael, the husband. Salt and pepper hair, steady job wiring apartment complexes, the kind of man whose greatest rebellion was working overtime to afford family vacations. Nathan despised him instantly. Michael represented everything Nathan could never be: stability, safety, trust. And then, Grace. The 9-year-old girl bounding down suburban sidewalks with her pink bike and helmet was the most dangerous discovery of all. Her existence was proof Evelyn had moved on, proof that she had created something beautiful while Nathan rotted in a cage. It made his vengeance sharpen into a new, cruel edge. The first sign Evelyn received of Nathan's presence was small. A folded note slid under her car windshield while she was shopping for groceries. There was no signature, just 3 words. "Nice house, sis." Her knees buckled when she read it. She scanned the crowded parking lot, heart pounding, but saw no one staring at her. The second note arrived a week later, tucked into her locker at work despite hospital security. "Grace looks like me." Evelyn nearly collapsed. She refused to tell Michael at first, not wanting to terrify him or to give Nathan the satisfaction of knowing he had gotten under her skin. But that night, she locked every window, double-checked the doors, and found herself staring at Grace as she slept, tears silently streaking her face. Unlike the impulsive boy who once pulled a trigger in panic, Nathan waited. Revenge wasn't about speed, it was about corrosion. He wanted Evelyn to drown in anticipation, to feel the noose tightening before the rope even touched her neck. He sabotaged Michael's van by slashing the tires, but left no footprints behind. He stole Evelyn's mail and replaced it later just to remind her she was vulnerable. Once, while she was sleeping upstairs, he jimmied the backyard gate open and left it swinging for her to find in the morning. These weren't attacks, they were whispers. Proof he could reach her life whenever he wished. By the 3rd month, Evelyn's perfect suburban image was cracking. She snapped at Michael more often, pulled Grace out of school early, claiming stomach aches, and her coworkers at the hospital noticed her trembling hands when administering IVs. Finally, she confessed to Michael about the notes. "He's out, Michael, and he's here. He wants to destroy me." Michael, ever the skeptic until then, paled when Evelyn handed him the folded notes. He wanted to storm to the police, but Evelyn stopped him. "They'll need evidence. Nathan's too smart now. He won't give them anything they can use. He wants me, not the system." Michael held her, but Evelyn felt no comfort. She knew Nathan well enough to understand that he had only just begun. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Grace was riding her bike around the block when a man in a dark hoodie knelt at the corner tying his shoe. She slowed as she rode past, and the man smiled at her. "You're fast," he said casually. "Your mom must be proud." Grace beamed the way children do when complimented. "Yeah, she is." The man nodded once, stood, and walked away without another word. Grace mentioned it over dinner that night. Evelyn froze mid-bite, her fork clattering to the plate. What did he look like? Her voice was higher, too sharp. Grace shrugged. "Just a man. Dark hoodie." He smiled. Michael tried to calm her, saying Chicago was full of strangers who meant no harm. But Evelyn knew. Her brother had made his introduction. Not a threat, but a glimpse. A predator circling the edges of her child's innocence. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. And when she did, she dreamed of Nathan's eyes, hardened by prison walls, staring through Grace's smile. Nathan wasn't reckless. He knew Evelyn's instinct would be to go to the police, but he also knew fear had a way of silencing people. He remembered her in court, trembling but resolute. Now he wanted to break that resolve. Using contacts he cultivated inside prison, Nathan obtained a burner phone. One night, Evelyn's phone rang at 3:07 a.m. She answered, groggy, expecting perhaps a hospital emergency. His voice slid through the line like a blade. "You thought prison changed me, Evie? It only made me patient. Every breath you take now belongs to me." She froze, unable to respond. "You remember when you swore you'd always protect me?" Nathan continued, voice icy. "This is me keeping my promise instead. One day I'll return the favor. I'll protect you from everything but me." The line went dead. Evelyn dropped the phone. For the first time in years, she shattered into sobs, hugging herself on the kitchen floor until sunrise. By now, Evelyn knew the police couldn't stop what was coming. Nathan wasn't leaving fingerprints. He wasn't breaking laws in ways she could prove. He was weaving terror like a spider, waiting for her to struggle deeper into his web. She had two choices: collapse under the weight of fear, or fight back. For the first time since testifying against her brother, Evelyn felt a spark of defiance. If Nathan wanted a war, then she would not be the helpless sister he remembered. She began documenting every note, every call, every strange incident. She bought a firearm and learned to shoot at a range in secret, not even telling Michael. At work, she befriended a retired police officer turned hospital security guard, subtly asking questions about handling stalkers. And at night, as Grace slept soundly in the next room, Evelyn whispered to herself, "You want revenge, Nathan? Then you'll learn this time it won't come easy." For months, the tension in Evelyn Carter's home was like a live wire humming under the walls, felt but unseen, sparking in silence. Nathan had conquered the first stage of revenge. Now he was ready to make her world bleed. It began with a quiet act of violence, not against her body, but her reputation. One late evening at the hospital, Evelyn's supervisor called her into the office, frowning deeply. "We've had reports," Dr. Larkin said, sliding a manila folder across the desk. Inside were copies of typed complaints accusing Evelyn of negligence, that she skipped patient check-ins, that medications weren't administered correctly, that she fell asleep on duty. Evelyn's mouth went dry. "That's not true. I chart every check. Her supervisor sighed. "I believe you, Evelyn, but someone is compiling detailed claims. If administration investigates, your license could be on the line." When Evelyn left the office, her legs shook so badly she had to lean against the wall. She knew who was behind it. Nathan had found a way into her professional life. That night, as she lay awake next to Michael, she stared at the ceiling and thought, "He isn't satisfied with frightening me. He wants to ruin me." 2 weeks later, Grace came home quiet, refusing to speak. Evelyn pressed her dear daughter until tears spilled down her cheeks. "There was a man outside school. He stood by the fence. He smiled at me the way you said bad men do." Evelyn's chest collapsed inside her. "Did he say anything to you?" Grace shook her head. "Just watched me." Michael exploded when he heard. He stormed to the police the next morning, demanding protection for his family. They agreed to patrol the neighborhood more, but without proof, without a photo, without a plate number, there was little they could do. Nathan knew this. He was careful. He was the ghost Evelyn couldn't catch. Michael, usually gentle, began to unravel. He installed cameras around the house, checked locks compulsively, and even started sleeping with a baseball bat by the door. His easy laughter was gone, his conversations reduced to sharp questions. Did you lock this? Did you double-check that? Evelyn felt guilt gnaw at her ribs. This wasn't just her war anymore. By testifying years ago, she had made Nathan her enemy, but Michael and Grace were now collateral in his revenge. One night, Michael finally broke. I can't live like this, Evelyn. Every night I wait for him to come through that door. I don't even know what he wants. Money, our family, our lives. What did you do to him back then? Evelyn's lips trembled. She hadn't told him the full details of Nathan's crime. She hadn't told him she'd watched her brother pull a trigger, that he'd begged her to keep his secret and she'd chosen the law instead. So she confessed everything. Michael stared at her, the silence thick, his face pale with something between shock and anger. At last he said in a low voice, "You didn't just testify, you destroyed him." Evelyn's heart dropped. "I saved him from worse." "Did you?" Michael asked sharply. "Or did you condemn us all instead?" The words cut deep. Michael left the room to sleep on the couch, and Nathan, wherever he was, celebrated the wedge he had driven into her marriage without firing a bullet. The escalation came next. One night at 2 a.m., Evelyn woke to the sharp crackle of wood. When she looked out the bedroom window, her scream ripped the silence. Their front porch was on fire, flames licking the wooden railing, smoke thickening fast. Michael bolted into action, grabbing the fire extinguisher, while Evelyn ran to scoop Grace out of bed, pressing her daughter's face into her chest to shield her from the smoke. By the time the fire department arrived, the blaze had been controlled, but the porch was scorched black. A lighter sat on the steps, deliberately left behind as a calling card. The cops documented everything, adding it to the file of possible harassment. But still, no fingerprints, no video footage to incriminate Nathan. He was slippery, untouchable. Grace refused to sleep in her own room after that. Evelyn sat awake for nights, rocking her child, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Mommy won't let him hurt you. Days later, Evelyn found what she feared most, proof Nathan could enter their home. It was evening when she went down to the basement to switch laundry. On the far wall, written in jagged black spray paint, were 4 chilling words: blood over everything. Her knees buckled. That phrase, a Carter family oath their father used to say when they were kids, was Nathan's reminder. Betrayal of blood was unforgivable. When Michael saw it, his face turned pale and hard. He was inside. He walked through this house while we slept. Evelyn vomited into the laundry sink. Her sanctuary, her home, had been defiled. The breaking point hardened Evelyn instead of shattering her. Fear was still there. It wrapped her bones so tight she sometimes couldn't breathe. But beneath it, anger began to bloom. If Nathan wanted to make her world a battlefield, then she wouldn't meet him as prey. She would meet him as a soldier. She began calling old contacts from Georgia, people who knew Donovan's crew, to piece together Nathan's movements. She kept the gun she'd bought hidden under her mattress, practicing at the shooting range twice a week. And each night before she went to bed, she whispered, not to God, but to Nathan himself, "You're not the only Carter who can fight." But Nathan was always a step ahead. One crisp October morning, Evelyn walked Grace to school. When they returned home, the mailbox was stuffed, not with bills or letters, but with photographs, dozens of them. Snapshots of Grace, playing in the yard, walking with friends, sitting in class by a window, and one photo of Evelyn herself, sleeping. She screamed so forcefully, Michael came running. He sifted the photos, his hands trembling, his face drained of color. "He's everywhere. We can't protect her. We can't protect any of us." For the first time, Evelyn saw defeat in her husband's eyes. And she realized that Nathan wasn't just dismantling her life piece by piece, he was dismantling the very people she loved, eroding their spirit until nothing remained. Evelyn had stopped sleeping. Every creak of the house, every bark of a dog down the street, every rustle of autumn wind against the window jolted her upright with heart-racing terror. Michael's nerves had frayed to threads, and Grace, her laughter had dimmed. Childhood had been replaced by the constant watchfulness of prey. The photographs had been the worst. Seeing herself vulnerable, asleep, violated under her own roof had cracked something inside her. This wasn't just revenge anymore, it was war. And Nathan was winning. Then came the night that broke everything. Michael didn't come home from work. His van never pulled into their driveway at 6 p.m. like it always did, headlights washing over the tired porch. Evelyn called his phone again and again. No answer. By 9 p.m., her panic metastasized into something she could barely control. She called his boss, who said Michael had clocked out hours earlier. She called the police. They logged it as a possible missing person, promised to send patrols. At midnight, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered with shaking hands. Nathan's voice slithered through. Michael's a good man. Shame he loves you, because that makes him part of this. No! Evelyn screamed into the phone. Don't touch him. Nathan, take this out on me. Please. Silence. Then a noise in the background. A muffled groan. Michael. Bound. Nathan chuckled low. You always said you'd protect the people you love, Evie. Let's see how far you'll go this time. The line went dead. Evelyn dropped the phone, hands covering her mouth to hold back the scream clawing up her throat. Grace wandered into the living room, rubbing her eyes. Mommy, what's wrong? Evelyn scooped her daughter up, sobbing into her hair, whispering, I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. 2 days later, fishermen on the Chicago River made a grisly find. Michael's body, weighted with bricks, throat slit. The police came to Evelyn's door, hats off, their voices slow and careful, as though she were glass. Evelyn collapsed onto the porch, her cry a raw animal sound that echoed through the neighborhood. Grace clutched at her side, sobbing, Where's Daddy? Where's Daddy? But Evelyn could not speak. She already knew. And in her gut, she knew who had done it. No fingerprints, no DNA, no recorded call trace. Nathan had learned his lessons too well. The police couldn't help her. No one could. Michael was gone, and Evelyn's world was smashed into ash. Grief became fury, flames roaring through her veins. Nathan wanted her broken, bent, trembling, but grief carved steel inside her instead. At Michael's funeral, she stood rigid, her daughter asleep on her lap, her mind far away. A single vow formed with clarity she hadn't felt in years. If the law can't stop you, Nathan, then I will. She dug out the shoebox of his letters, reading every word again, this time not with trembling fear, but with the eye of a hunter analyzing prey. The letters spoke of patience, of strategy, of weakness. Between the lines, she spotted snippets of truth, contacts he still relied on, places he mentioned with nostalgia or rage. She began to prepare, not just self-defense, but counterattack. Evelyn visited gun ranges, perfecting her shot until the recoil no longer rattled her bones. She altered her routines, driving different routes to work, setting traps with cameras inside and outside the house. She withdrew cash quietly, building a reserve. In secret, she reached out to one of her hospital coworkers, Sergeant Alvin Price, now retired, who had worked gang detail in Atlanta in the 90s. When she whispered Nathan's name, his expression darkened. That devil still breathing? He muttered. Then you better know. You won't scare him off. Only the grave ends men like him. Evelyn tightened her jaw. Then the grave it is. But Nathan never stopped circling. Weeks after Michael's death, Evelyn found a new package outside her door. Inside was Michael's wedding band, cleaned, shining under the porch light, and a note. "I told you, blood over everything." Evelyn didn't cry this time. Her hands steadied. She slipped the ring onto her necklace chain, as though carrying Michael's memory next to her heart. Grace, traumatized, grew clingier by the day. Nightmares woke her nightly. One evening, Grace whispered, "What if he comes for me, Mommy?" Evelyn kissed her daughter's forehead with a fierceness that almost hurt. "Then he'll have to go through me first." And for the first time, she realized she meant it literally. The climax of Nathan's torment came just days later. Grace never showed up after school. When Evelyn arrived, frantic, a teacher said she had left with her uncle. He'd shown a photo of Evelyn and claimed there was an emergency at home. Trusting, they let her leave. Evelyn collapsed, hysteria bubbling through her lungs. Uncle, only one man in the world Grace could mistake as family like that. Her phone rang again. Nathan. "She's safe, for now," he said, his voice calm, composed, even gentle. "But you need to learn the pain you caused me, Evelyn. You need to lose everything, the way you made me lose everything when you testified." Evelyn's heart split open. "Nathan, please, don't hurt her. She's innocent. She's a child." "So was I once. And when you turned me over, you killed that child forever." Click. The line went dead again. Evelyn collapsed on her knees, sobbing, but then something broke inside her. Tears dried mid-scream, replaced by a fury so sharp it felt like clarity. "No more," she whispered. "No more hiding. No more begging." She remembered Nathan's prison letters where he reminisced about an old warehouse district in South Chicago, a place he called the bones of the city. She was sure that's where he had taken Grace. And this time, she wouldn't call the police. This was between them, always had been. She armed herself, pistol loaded, flashlight, knife tucked in her boot. If this was war, then she carried her husband's memory into the last battle. The night was bone cold, the kind of November chill that gnawed through coats. Evelyn pulled up to the crumbling warehouse, heart like thunder in her ears. The building loomed dark, its windows shattered like blind eyes, its iron doors wide enough to swallow nightmares whole. Inside, faint light flickered from somewhere deeper. She slipped in, gun raised, whispering her daughter's name, "Grace, Grace." Her footsteps echoed like betrayal against concrete. Then came his voice, Nathan's, calm, steady, sanctimonious. "You came, Evie. I knew you would. You could never let blood go unanswered." She followed the sound until she emerged into the cavernous main hall. There, tied to a chair under a single bulb, was her daughter, crying softly, her mouth gagged. Evelyn's heart broke and hardened at once, and Nathan stepped out of the shadows. Older, scarred, but his eyes alight with the same feral rage she remembered in the courtroom decades ago. He smiled, all teeth. "Welcome home, sister." The cavernous warehouse seemed to breathe with the past. Steel beams rusted, rain leaking through holes in the roof, rats scattering in corners. But all Evelyn saw was her daughter. Grace sat strapped to a chair under the swaying bulb, her small chest heaving, tears streaking her face. "Mommy!" She tried to scream through the gag, her voice strangled. "Shh, baby, I'm here," Evelyn whispered, gun raised. Nathan stepped closer from the shadows, his face illuminated for the first time. Prison had carved him down into something unrecognizable. Lean muscles stretched over sharp bones, a jagged scar under his right eye, and hair peppered with gray. But the eyes, those were the same, burning, vengeful, wounded. 18 years, Nathan said quietly, his voice strangely calm. 18 years I dreamed of this. Your voice in that courtroom, it played in my head like scripture. I saw Nathan pull the trigger. Every day I heard it, Evelyn. Every goddamn day. Evelyn's mouth went dry. Put her down, Nathan. This is between you and me. She doesn't deserve... Nathan's laugh echoed across the rafters. And did I deserve it? Did I deserve my own sister handing me to the wolves? Blood, Evie. Blood above everything. That was our promise. You killed a man, Evelyn rasped, finger tightening on the trigger. You made your choices. I saved you from yourself. You destroyed me, Nathan snarled. Now I'll return the favor. He circled her slowly, knife glinting in his hand. Evelyn's gun tracked him, but too close to Grace, and she risked everything. You built this life, Nathan hissed. Perfect house, loving husband. How's Michael, by the way? Pulled at the bottom of the river? Evelyn's heart clenched, rage crackling through her veins. You monster! No, Nathan said calmly, jaw tightening. You made me a monster. You raised me, Evie. Then you abandoned me the moment it mattered most. Evelyn's voice cracked but stayed strong. I chose right over wrong. I chose life over death. Nathan stepped closer, his breath ragged. Then tonight, you'll choose death. And he lunged. The world snapped into chaos. Evelyn fired, bullet screaming past his shoulder, sparking against steel. Nathan ducked, knife flashing as he slashed at her arm, catching fabric but missing flesh. She spun, elbowing him, years of bottled fury given form. Grace screamed into her gag, sobbing violently as she thrashed against the ropes. Evelyn kicked, pistol whipping as Nathan dodged, moving like the prison predator he had become. He tackled her against a wall, knife grazing her cheek. You were supposed to protect me, he growled, spit flying. I did, Evelyn screamed back, smashing her forehead into his, staggering him. The gun clattered across the concrete, spinning just out of reach. Both dove for it, bodies colliding in raw desperation. Nathan's hands closed around Evelyn's throat, squeezing. Her airway crushed, vision blotting to black. Say it, he hissed, eyes animalistic. Her hands clawed weakly, but then found Michael's ring tied to her wrist. A surge of defiance blasted through her fading lungs. She ripped the knife from his hand, slashing across his forearm. Blood sprayed. He roared and faltered. She shoved him back, gasping precious air, crawling for the gun. Her fingers brushed cold steel, just as Nathan tackled her again. Both siblings wrestled, snarling, sobbing, years of rage and grief collapsing into this single violent heartbeat. The gun fired once, a deafening crack. Silence followed. Nathan staggered back, clutching his side, blood gushing between his fingers. His eyes widened, not in anger now, but in something hollow. You, he rasped, sinking to his knees. You really chose them over me? Her hands shook violently as she held the gun steady. Tears poured down her face. I chose what was right, Nathan, and I'll choose it again. He coughed, a bitter half-laugh. Then you and I were never family. And with that, Nathan collapsed onto the concrete, eyes fixed on her but unseeing. Evelyn's chest heaved, her ears ringing with the gunshot that seemed to echo into infinity. For a heartbeat, she couldn't move. Couldn't believe the war that had consumed her entire life had ended in this grim silence. Then she heard it, Grace's muffled sob. Evelyn dropped the gun and stumbled to the chair, cutting her daughter's ropes with trembling hands. Pulling the gag free, Grace flung herself into her arms, sobbing, "Mommy, Mommy." Evelyn held her, rocking, whispering through gasps of air, "I'm here. It's over. It's over." But deep inside, she knew it wasn't truly over. Because though Nathan's body lay on the floor, his shadow would always remain in her blood, in her memories, in the scars carved on her soul. By the time the sirens siced through the Chicago night, Evelyn was cradling Grace in the corner of the warehouse, her shirt soaked in her brother's blood. The gun sat abandoned, still warm. The officers found Nathan sprawled on the cement, chest stained crimson, his lifeless eyes fixed on a ceiling where the bulb swayed faintly, as though mocking him. Evelyn didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply looked down at her daughter, the only piece of family she had left, her arms tightening around her small frame. The cops asked questions, snapped photos, tied crime tape. To them, it was another homicide in a city that churned them out daily. Self-defense, they said. She would be cleared. But to Evelyn, it wasn't paperwork or procedure. It was blood. Her brother, the one person she had once promised never to abandon, and the person who had forced her to destroy him. There was no funeral for Nathan. His body lay unclaimed, destined for a city burial lot. Evelyn couldn't bring herself to attend. She imagined the gray dirt closing over him, a coffin sinking into the anonymous ground, and wondered if in his final moment he had ever remembered the boy he once was, the boy who chased fireflies, who called her Evie with laughter in his voice. That boy was gone long before her bullet had ended him. And yet, as she tucked Grace into bed nights later, Evelyn whispered a prayer into the silence. Not for forgiveness, but for peace. Wherever you are, she muttered to the ghost of her brother. I hope the fire finally died. The days that followed were hardest on Grace. She woke in the night screaming, terrified Uncle Nate stood by her bed. She clung tighter to Evelyn than ever, refusing to let go. School became difficult. Classmates asked questions, whispers followed her in hallways. Evelyn sought therapy for both of them. The therapist told her, trauma runs through bloodlines, but so does resilience. Evelyn repeated that mantra daily. She wouldn't let Nathan's vengeance become her daughter's inheritance. Grace would not grow up under the shadow of rage. Each day she walked her slowly back into a sense of normal. Bike rides in the park, ice cream trips, bedtime stories that weren't about monsters, but about hope. Slowly, Grace began to laugh again. Small bursts at first, then longer, until her smile no longer looked borrowed. For Evelyn, healing was more complicated. At the hospital, whispers chased her. Colleagues who once admired her courage now eyed her differently, as the woman whose own brother had terrorized her family, as the nurse who had killed a man. But Evelyn no longer cared about their judgments. She moved through the halls quietly, focusing on patience, pouring her energy into saving the broken where she could. Each life she touched became an atonement, a way to balance the life she had taken. At night, she sometimes stood on the porch of her rebuilt home, staring at the quiet street. She carried Michael's ring on her necklace still, feeling its weight against her chest like both wound and anchor. She spoke to him sometimes in the silence, imagining his calm voice guiding her. But inside, she knew she carried another voice, the echo of Nathan, whispering accusations, reminding her of the oath, blood over everything. Was it justice? The question haunted her. She had testified against Nathan to stop him from becoming a murderer, yet in the end, she had killed him herself. The irony cut bitter. But then she'd look at Grace, alive, breathing, her daughter's hand wrapped around hers, and she would whisper to herself, it wasn't justice. It was survival. And maybe, in this world, survival was the only justice they could hope for. A year later, Evelyn and Grace moved out of Chicago into a quieter town in Wisconsin. A house backed by woods, a wide yard where Grace could grow up unchained by city fears. Evelyn worked at a small clinic. The neighbors didn't know her story, and she didn't offer it. Here, she wasn't the woman haunted by her brother's ghost. She was just Evelyn. A nurse, a single mother, a survivor. But sometimes, on nights when the wind rattled through the trees, she swore she could still see Nathan's face in the dark. Not the scarred, vengeful man he became, but the boy she once held close after their father died. The boy she fed with scrambled eggs and cheap cereal. The boy she swore she'd protect. She wondered, always, if there could have been another path. When Grace turned 12, she asked Evelyn a question she had been dreading for years. "Mom, why did Uncle Nate hate you?" Evelyn froze. Her daughter's wide eyes searched for truth, for closure. Evelyn searched herself. She could have lied, spun a story about bad men doing bad things, but Nathan deserved truth even in death. "He hated me," Evelyn said softly, "because I stopped him from hurting people. He thought family meant protecting each other no matter what. But sometimes loving someone means stopping them even when they don't want you to." Grace frowned, thinking hard. "But you protected me." Evelyn's throat tightened. She pulled her daughter close and whispered into her hair, "Yes, baby, and I always will." Years passed. The pain dulled but never vanished. Evelyn grew older, her hair streaking with gray like Michael's once had. Grace became strong, resilient, determined to study criminal justice, perhaps an echo of all she had lived through as a child. Nathan became a story whispered only in Evelyn's memory. His revenge had scarred her, but it had also defined her strength. In destroying him, she had saved her daughter. On the final night of summer one year, Evelyn sat alone on her porch, stars glimmering above. She held Michael's ring in her hand and whispered, "It's over." Then after a long silence, she whispered again, softer. Almost to herself, almost to the ghost of Nathan lingering in her veins. We were blood, but love was stronger. She breathed deep, letting the cool air fill her. For the first time in decades, she felt peace.
The Carter family's story ended not with a bang, not with a scream, but with a quiet truth that sometimes blood ties are the chains that drown us, and sometimes they are the fire that saves us. Evelyn had chosen survival, chosen her daughter, chosen life. And though Nathan's shadow would never fully leave her, his revenge had failed in the one way that mattered most. Grace lived. And Evelyn endured. So friends, how did you like this story? Do let us know in the comments. For more such exciting stories, make sure to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share it with your friends. See you in the next video with another story like this.